everyone. We are excited to join you today for our third Leading Conversations. This is our third episode, and I am here with the esteemed Dennis Bernard, and I am Dr. Radine Copeland. How are you today, Dennis?
Oh, fine. Busy as always, but it is Friday, so, slightly different aspect to life right now.
Exactly. We usually record on a Wednesday, so we're
Yeah.
usually, recording on hump day, but today we're recording at the end of the week. And I think the opportunity here is that we've gotten a lot of nuggets for the entire week. So I think our reflection would be loaded with rich insights on our topic. Dennis, are you ready to hear what our topic is for today?
Definitely. It's a good
Okay.
one.
It's a good one. So, my question today for our discussion and episode is, how sustainable are high performance teams and what factors contribute to their long-term success? So, audience, that is what we will be chatting about today. And I hope your wheels are turning as you get ready to hear Dennis and myself chat back and forth about our perspectives on this topic. Dennis, I'm going to let you take the floor and go ahead and jump in.
Okay, I'll take the first innings. Okay, I think when we're talking about this topic, being the sort of questioning person I am, is I'd like to say, what is a team? How do we define it? And how do we make a team? I think that's important. And then we consider how long it can last. So if you like, I'll lead off with my few fanciful ideas about what is the team, and then we'll go on from there. So a team, I think, is a very overused word. If you go to any corporate headquarters, somebody will throw open the door and you see a whole sea of faces sitting at desks and say, this is my team. But within that team is a bunch of individuals with different ambitions, different ideas. They probably all but one hate the boss. And the idea is that they're not all pulling in as a team, I think is the point. There are major objectives overhanging them, and they have to meet certain things to keep their jobs and so on. But my view is the team has to be very much more interactive. The group of people has to be more interactive and actually work together, not on sort of objectives that are out there and they're all doing a little piece of it. They actually have to interact to have that definition as a team. Another definition might be 4 horses yoked together pulling a wagon. Well, you'll say that is a team of horses. Those horses are individuals. They'd love to do other things, but they are actually yoked together and having to run in the same direction to the same place at the same time. So that's my question about what is the team, and then we go on. I'll just take it a little bit further and say, how do we form the team? In real life, those of us who are managers will inherit a team, which always gives you a bit of a headache. There are people who will form a team, and that comes in a couple of strands as well. You either buy the best players, as all the sports teams do, and hope that it works as an orchestra or a team effort, or are you buying 11 or 15 individuals who will all go and do their own thing? Or do you take basically what are people with talent, but not very highly considered, and pull them together and make them work together? So that's a little bit about the backdrop. I mean, the high performance element, we can start jumping on board once we kind of define where we're going with that team idea. That's my view anyway.
Okay,
So,
Dennis. So I know
sorry, I took up so
audience.
much time. Yeah.
Dennis, this is our podcast. We can take up
Okay.
as much time as we want. We are
Got
just
it.
going to make sure that we keep our listeners engaged. But Dennis, I
Yeah.
know they want to know, what is your position? Because that's going to be the foundation of our debate.
Okay.
How
Got it.
sustainable?
My
What is your
position,
time frame?
time frame. I'm a believer in the short run.
Okay.
For being realistic, how often do people as individuals peak, and for how long? And a group of individuals even more difficult. We know why, because if a team becomes very high performing, it starts to disintegrate by its very definition, because everybody thinks I'm great and they go off to do their own thing. So I'm for the shorter run. When you say how long, I'd say possibly 2 or 3 years. I think it depends with the same lineup. I think you can make the team run longer if you fill the gaps, phasing in bits over time and changing the lineup gradually. And I think a lot comes back to the manager of this team, which I'm sure you'll have a lot to say about. But I'm on the short run. I don't believe that, this orchestra can play at top pitch forever.
Okay. So, Dennis, your position is that high performing teams, right, they can only sustain for 2 to 3 years. And this is if the same players are on the team.
Yeah.
Right? Did I mistake?
Yeah.
And then you believe for us to have an effective conversation about high performing teams, we need a very clear definition of what a team is. And how does this manager, I guess, inherit this high performing team? You believe that those factors will contribute to how well the team performs and sustains. Am I correct?
Yes, and I think the other factor that we have to bring in is the nature of the task. You might be able to get your team to run at optimum pitch for a period of time, but if it's the same task that goes on every day like a treadmill, they're going to get tired of that. It could be you bring them to maximum pitch when they have a finite project in view. They'll all then pull to finish that project. So you have to look at the nature of the work that the team is doing. Let's just talk very quickly about a football team.
Mm-hmm.
Your average UK football team plays about 50 or 60 matches a year. So that's pretty well every week. And there has to come a time when people say, oh my God, I'm going to have to play another match this Saturday. And, it's a treadmill. If it was saying you are going to play 10 matches and at the end of it is a cup final, that's a little different, isn't it? It's easier to motivate people. But if I say to somebody, you are going to do this for the next 4 years, people might go, oh my God, the money might be great, fine. But it's the motivation too, isn't it? You're more the psychologist than I am, so you'll probably have a very good view on that.
Yeah, well, I think that's interesting because you're talking about sports, which in full transparency, listeners, we talk about sports all the time. So I know we talk about sports, we use music analogies, because at the end of the day, I think pop culture is something that a lot of people can relate to because different people are part of different organizations. There's some people who have never experienced a toxic work culture. So you're talking about work and they're like, well, I can't relate to that, but everyone has followed some pop culture something, right? Sports, or be it musicians or a boy band or a girl band, and they're always dynamics publicly on display. And we all have opinions, even though we're not in the thick of things. We have no true perspective. We're just reading what the tabloids put out. But my perspective in regards to this topic is that I have always been a lot more generous than Dennis here. I would say that a high-performing team, I think, can sustain about maybe 5 years. I'm not saying that they would have the exact level of success every year, right? Because we're dealing with humans, not robots, and even robots malfunction now and then. But we're definitely, I do think that a high-performing team can sustain for 5 years. But the caveat and the condition for that would be that there's consistent leadership. And I think leadership, which is my sweet spot, and Dennis's sweet spot is HR and HR technology and defining the value of HR. So we work really well together in terms of bringing it together in these types of conversations about building better work cultures where employees and leaders can thrive. So my position is, yes, how the team is formed and how the leader inherits the team, that definitely matters, right? So if it's a team that the leader builds, then that is their baby, right? That is their
Yes.
team, and
They
regardless
they
of
own it, yeah.
exactly, and regardless of what you think on the outside, looking at that team and how that leader builds their team, it doesn't matter. That is their team. That is their boat that they're rowing. And once a leader has a clear brand and vision and philosophy, then they can hire people with very similar philosophies and they can thrive. Now, I will say that for me, Dennis, I believe that this question has to be placed under the umbrella of industries. Some industries have more stable employee retention than other industries. Now, when we talk about high-performing teams and we talk about the length of these teams, if we look at sales environments, like insurance or retail or anything where metrics in that daily sense, not just like an overarching, okay, let me look at your 3-month performance and how you completed these reports. No, we're talking about get out and get. We're talking about dog eat dog. We're talking about if
It's
you
pressure.
get this client before I do, then you excel. We're talking about that level of aggression to succeed and assertiveness to succeed. So I believe in those types of teams. I do believe that the sustainability of those teams are a lot shorter because of the nature of it. And coming back to what we have discussed previously, Dennis, is when you have high-performance salespersons on a team, they're often poached, right? They're often poached because they're good and their numbers prove they're good.
Of course.
They're good. And that's the thing about sales environments. It's not just somebody say you're good. You have numbers to prove you're good, right?
Totally.
Because they can
and to make things worse, in most organizations where you have a good salesperson, you keep raising the targets. And that gives the impulse to move, because you're raising the targets until you reach a point they can't do it. So somewhere along the line, you're going to lose this person to the competition who's going to say, this is a good guy, we want him. It's as straightforward as that.
Exactly. So I do believe that it goes back to the leader emotional intelligence, and the leader's ability, which I speak about heavily in my keynotes and trainings, the leader's ability to have a very distinctive brand, leadership philosophy, which in turn will allow the leader to pick members that are able to sustain under their brand of leadership. And I will say that it's very interesting. And the reason I say this, because I hear stories all the time about peers on sales teams or just teams where it's heavily just retail teams, even if they're in product management or whatever, their leaders are driving them to produce at higher levels every time. What part I'm interested in is in the work culture and the psychological effects of being on high performance teams and how that contributes to the team sometimes disbanding. Because in a real world or in an ideal world, in a utopia, we would like to believe that ethics are, just of higher standards. But anytime you're in an aggressively competitive environment where awards are being won and somebody wins this award over the other, what I have found in my limited but rich time on this earth is that those types of teams oftentimes, I shouldn't say oftentimes, but maybe it may be fair in sales-oriented teams. You find that there may be a lot of unethical practices that
Yeah.
begin happening, and some leaders promote unethical practices, and some leaders do not. But due to the nature of the jobs they're doing, you will find that at some point someone
Yeah.
would be fudging the system. And I have personal experience with that, thinking,
Yeah,
wow.
I've seen that.
Yes, I have had personal experience thinking, wow, I mean, I am a high sales performer, but this person is blowing it out of the park. And I kept thinking, oh, wow, I guess, and because I have a growth mindset, I kept thinking, like, I really need to sit down with this person and learn and see how they
Yes.
do it. Come to find out, months later, the person and another member of that team, they were fired because they were fudging the system. So hopefully, in the context of this conversation, someone is listening out there to know that they should run their own race. And oftentimes in high performing teams, you should not. It's like the little fable or the story with the dog with the bone, right? He looked in his reflection and he saw a bigger bone, and he dropped his bone, jumping into that for just a reflection. A lot of people, their success is a mirage, and those types of individuals on your team, even if it's one person, can cause infighting and a toxic environment, can cause imposter syndrome in others. And then this high performing team gets disbanded because the ethics and the culture became toxic. So those are some of the things I think will contribute to a shorter term of a high performing team. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. The higher the pressure put on individuals, more likely that ethics and good conduct go out the window because people are driven to achieve. And that's a very good argument against high pressure. Because although, companies like to think that they're pressuring the individuals to perform better, they're probably performing smarter. And that means breaking rules. And that becomes expensive in the long run because it eventually affects the brand as well. When you mentioned pop culture, for those who will know, well, most of the world knows about the Beatles, but just look at the trajectory of them. They hit the pop scene in a big way at the end of 1962, 7 years on, and through the same band members, but the evolution of the music they played was immense. Between 1962 and 1969, 7 years, they ran the whole gamut of music genre, but at the end they broke up because it became toxic, because the individuals became bigger than the band, partly, and so they all went their different ways. And if you look at the Rolling Stones, they've been rolling and rolling for like 50 odd years, 60 years, touring, singing the same songs because they peaked years ago. They probably peaked in the 1970s and they haven't transitioned on beyond there, and they're doing the same thing for money. Fine. So you might say they're high performing because you've got to pay $500 to get a ticket, but in the sense of creativity as well, there's a mix, isn't there, about the performance, depending on the industry. If we take sales, we're saying sales numbers, but you could say sales numbers that are sustainable. Take the HR tech industry in the late 90s. HR tech people at product demonstrations would say, oh, yeah, that thing you're asking for is the next release. Sign here. They would then have 10 years of phone calls daily from clients who felt that they'd been missold to and so on. So the HR tech people nowadays are a lot more transparent about what their product can do, because if you get a sale, it is more sustainable. And I think that's the key as well about the high performance bit. We don't want a blip because somebody's breaking the rules or saying something or doing things which are unethical. We want sales that are and the clients are gonna keep coming back and buying from us every time. So it's almost like a Darwin's law actually dictates, these teams will implode in a sense because the players within that team will get poached, or they'll go off and do their own thing. They'll either they'll just say, I want to do something different. So I think very much of the nature of the work. You can't get people working on a treadmill that are going to perform forever as high performance, because as you said, they're not robots, they're human beings. They need motivation. And I think a lot of that comes back. What is the task like? How can the manager keep them going? It's a complex question, but my answer is still, I don't think, you're very, I think you're very generous with your assessment. And I think you're probably closer than I am. I've probably been around a bit too long to have faith in how long that effort could be sustained. But I think you're closer to the truth if you can get the factors right. You need the right players. Yeah, right players, right manager, right task, right environment. Exactly. Something along those lines.
Yeah, and everything is conditional, right? Everything is, if you plant a seed on rocky soil, it's not going to grow. So there's a lot of environmental factors, decisions, hiring decisions, and so forth that go into my assessment that it can last maybe going to 5 years. And when I say even like, and the condition will be last with the same members or lose a member. I do think the sales industry, anything with sales is so variable that those teams may last shorter in the original vision because of the nature of sales. But I'm thinking of some of the other teams like product management teams and so forth, where it's not like aggressive sales, like insurance or something where HR tech, where the team medicals, where they have to be selling outwardly in that necessary style of getting the product out the door, right? Direct facing to customer. But I do think there are different factors. Now, one of the reasons I can say is in understanding more of how many of these tech companies, or just companies, being based in Seattle and speaking to some of my friends, but having a background in higher ed and having my salary be determined a lot differently to how they have experienced, I did learn of some little tricks that these companies use. So for example, one friend was sharing that she got her salary, right? So let's say her salary is 100,000 to make the numbers easier. A bonus is 20,000. 50% of that salary is in stock, right? Stock and shares.
Right. Yeah.
She assumed that she would have gotten her bonus, possibly, or maybe they told her. But I do think sometimes you overlook, right? Sometimes you're like, oh, I just, yes, sometimes you lean on your own understanding, even if you're reading the fine print. So she did think that her 20,000 bonus would be in a check. Lo and behold, even that was put in stock and shares, right? So that means the actual money that she's receiving in her paycheck is what? $50,000. And you get to watch half of your salary in the stock, right? In the stock market, so their shares, right? And your bonus in stock. And what was interesting to me is the leaders, the top leaders, saying that the reason we design your salary that way is so you will stay. And that is a factor that they're doing. So you will stay. This is how we keep our employees and have the retention. So in that model, people are staying because they can't cash out half of their salary until after a year. But the twist of this story is that after a year, the stock dropped. So there was no motivation for my friend to take out her money because now her money, the money that
The
she has
shares are
earned,
underwater. Yeah,
right,
yeah.
it's underwater. So that's one factor. So now the money is still there, and now she can't leave because let's be clear, she only got paid half her salary and not even the bonus. Additionally, you can only take out your money every quarter. So there are scheduled times for you to take out your money. So you can only take it out for, and you can't take out all your money at once. I am saying that
No.
to say, Dennis, that
And
may
you
be some
take it
of the
out,
things.
you take it out at the price applying at that time.
Right. So exactly. So there's no motivation to take it
You
out
know,
when it's low. So you have to stay now another year. And then even with that, you cannot take out all your money and run. You have to stay. So I'm saying that it's basically, I know a lot of friends who work for these top companies, tech company, whatever. They have stayed with these companies for 5 years because that's the only time it makes sense for them to
yeah.
leave. So having said that, you see why I argue that these hyper, now they may not stay on the same team. So the team question is really the critical question we're asking here, because in a lot of these large companies, people can jump teams if they find a team to jump to. But if they cannot, for a while, and they want to build a reputation, because there's a lot of cultural dynamics in these types of work environments.
Right,
People want to put on a
right.
good face. It's competitive. They stay on the team for a while. So maybe you may be more correct in terms of 2 to 3 years on the team. But I do think people stay with the company a lot longer in these types of companies because their salary is
Yeah.
not guaranteed. What
And
are your thoughts on that, Dennis?
there's a nasty little sting in the tail on that one too, because those type of companies, and we see them laying off huge numbers of people over the
Exactly.
last year or two. And what happens when they do that? Well, the share price goes up. So your person with the shares is indirectly contributing to the people being thrown out, because what happens is a lot of CEO and other exec bonuses are actually based on the share price for the very same reasons as you've described, to keep them there. And when the share price goes down, the shares are deemed to be underwater. And the quick way to do it is dump a load of people. The shareholders are all happy. Everybody buys the shares. The price goes up, but you've got a lot of people out on the street. For the people who are left in the game, their shares will have gone up, but there'll be fewer of them. So, yeah, I mean, that sort of thing in a way. I mean, indirectly, it's almost like saying, you earn 100,000, but actually I'm going to put 50,000 in a bank deposit that you can't touch. The
That
only difference
entire
being
part.
that at least the money in the bank is worth whatever it is minus inflation. Whereas those stocks and shares are very much open to all sorts of fluctuation. I think it's a horrible system, but it works for some, And why? And don't you think that actually, if that's the only way they're going to retain people, it's a pretty sad reflection on their culture, because most companies don't do that, and they manage to keep the people they want to keep, motivating them, whatever it is they do. This way sounds a bit forcible, but yeah, maybe it's very specific to that industry, I would imagine. But no, I think those sort of teams. I think in any pressured situation, a team is not going to last as long as it could do. I think a smart manager will be looking to see which parts of his team or her team they're going to have to replace over time. So in a sense, you could have the same manager with the team changing. And don't forget also, there are other evolutionary factors outside of the organization that are making them change as well. The products that you're selling could suddenly not be selling. You've got to make new products and new approach and so on. So, I mean, there's a huge numbers of factors in there. I actually believe as well, for a team to keep going, they probably need to change the manager every so many years. I think I told a story that a national football team manager in 2014 got a national team, not a highly considered team. They got into the quarterfinals. So for the next football World Cup, they signed up the same guy. At the time, I remember saying, I don't think that's a good idea because this person has given their all. They have done the strategy, they picked the right people and so on, they got them a long way. But now he's got to go even better. With a team that is 4 years older, he's got to find good replacements and so on. And they need new inspiration. So I would say you've got the players and everybody marches along, but I think you might have to consider changing or swapping the manager around from time to time as well to keep that activity going.
Okay, so I have to ask, how often do you suggest switching out the leadership?
Well, I'm not very popular in my particular line because I've often said, how long should an HR director stay in post? You'll hear the screams of people out there right now. Let's say you come in to do a job, whatever thing. You're appointed as a director, as a manager, you come in. What are you going to do? You're going to sort out the problems and make things better. That's what you've got to do. But beyond that, are they then expecting you to do a sort of a maintenance job by just sort of, oiling the wheels now and again? Or have you come in and achieved all you need to do, which I would say within 4 years maximum, come in, solve the problems, put everything right? I, as a person, would move on to a new challenge. But the tendency very much, and it's a human trait, is actually, I'm getting paid pretty well. I've cracked all the problems. I think I'll just hang around a while now and build up my pension rights, whatever it is people do. That's human instinct. But they've actually played out their genuine effectiveness in the organization. Not a popular view, I imagine, especially to anybody who's listening, who's been sitting in the same job for 15 years. Thank you very much. But that's my view. If we're talking about high performance, we only have so much effectiveness in an organization, which is why I like contracts. I always believe that if you join an organization, you have 6 months to be able to do what you need to do. After that, you're part of the furniture and you've got to fight with the rest of the resources and the respect and all the rest of it. Okay, that's extreme. But I think, you get absorbed into the culture. When you arrive, you're new, you're bright, you're keen, you're eager to get to grips. People are going, wow, this is a breath of fresh air. Let's let them do this stuff. After 6 months, they all start to feel threatened. Oh my God, this guy, he's changing everything. And now they start to put the brakes on. And that is the point at which you are no longer fully effective.
So my position is that you cannot build a strong culture, one that is healthy and one that sustains, with too frequent leadership change, right? In managers.
Mhm.
Now, what
Yes.
I am an advocate for is, if the company is honest about their leadership development plans and providing opportunities to support emerging leaders, middle managers, and so forth, and there is a manager that is toxic or is not quite a match with the culture, I agree that some of the issues that we see in corporations, organizations, be it nonprofit, whatever, is the inability to yank the toxic leader. So
Yep.
I do believe that the good leaders, the toxic leaders, push them out, because people who are sincerely there to do work and help their employees and make things better with us focus and not a me focus, what's in it for me, they tend to leave under the pressure because they're too altruistic, but the toxic
Right.
leader remains. So I am an advocate for doing a good leadership inventory check and really having the standard of, if you continue to be toxic, we have to kick you out. The issue with the toxic leaders is that they bite back. And I think a lot of organizations, they kind of fear toxic leaders. HR, they're like, oh, just work around because people are complaining, but they don't, they know this person is going to fight back and not use very good strategies. So to me, that's the issue. But I will say that great leaders, they're gems and they're hard to find. However, if they're in a toxic culture and if they're in a leadership style, right? Or let's call it like a spaceship or whatever, umbrella, that does not have a clear philosophy and does not have like boundaries, clear boundaries on what we are and what we're not, and how we're going to do business, and where we're not just in the bylaws, not in just on the website, actual lived experience and practice. I do think that no matter what, those leaders, one, they're going to have high turnover, but of the good people, and the toxic people are going to sustain, and then they're going to, it's like mold growing, right? They're going to become the organization. But I do think that great leaders in great work environments, positive work cultures, they should be there for a period of time, because as the work I do, to get good leaders and to find people with that, I guess, mix of emotional intelligence, competency, and interpersonal savvy. And we are going to talk about this in our next episode, the ability to influence. Because remember, few leaders are able to get people to the next level. A lot of leaders, they're there, they have their team, and they may get them to do numbers, but they're not the leader of influence. Like great leaders are able to see the diamond in the rough, take that person and level them up. So when you find those leaders, I actually think they should sustain, but the leader has to continue to do an ego check. The leader has to continue to ask for honest feedback. The leader, you're talking about the leaders that they either get lost in the system because now they're no longer, they become furniture chair, people just sitting on them, pushing them out, blocking their ideas. So they may lose hope and say, well, you're not paying me enough for this, so I'm just going to come and do what we have to do. But I do think that if there are clear expectations, clear reasonable assessment metrics, professional development plans, and that is the culture of, we are here to support your growth trajectory, and that leader is one that is aggressively growth minded and thinking like, I always want a team. I always want a fresh team. Because a good leader will be promoting. Leaders will get coached, right? And that's a sign. Exactly. They will be developing other leaders. And if they keep this idea of, I want the best of the best, not in terms of I am winning at all costs, no matter what I have to do, in terms of character, competency, right, and collaboration, if they keep getting leaders under them who can do this, I do think that is a good model, and we don't have enough of that. And I think that's maybe why you're cynical, because you haven't seen many leaders who've been able to push back against the currents.
You're right. I mean, you're right.
I mean, if you don't see, it's like people who can't, they're like, I have friends who are like, I don't know anyone with a successful marriage. So once you don't see it, you have no evidence of it, then you believe that
it doesn't exist.
Right. It's like Bigfoot and all of these
that's
things.
right. No, I've seen excellent managers and leaders, and I've seen very indifferent ones. I think that's just about the distribution of humanity, isn't it? I think, there are good and bad, whatever they are. So no, I think your points are good about the leadership. I think they are very much the key to success in this. It's an interesting topic, very interesting topic.
It is an interesting topic, and I do think that high performing teams can sustain also if there's, as I said, transparency in metrics, transparent, fairness, right? Because
Yeah.
if it's a high performing team and someone is on that team and they're like, I feel as if I am contributing this amount,
Yes.
but this other person always gets the prize. And I need to see the numbers. No, you can't. When things are not transparent, when things are not above board, I do think these types of teams cannot
Oh,
sustain
yeah.
because people think that there's some shady business going on and they lose their spirit and they switch teams, right? So in that sense, I think that I still think it boils down to leadership and culture. And the other factor I want to add in terms of the composition of teams is that I really want to advocate for this idea of a high performing team is not just a team of skilled persons in one aspect. It's a team of individuals with unique skill sets that allow the team to gel. So they may not all be the top salesperson. They'll be good, but one person might be the gel. One person may be a good mediator. One person may be the person who can handle conflict. One person may be just the energy of the group. One person may be the person who just likes to take notes and organize. I think if people think of teams in that way and not just look at people as numbers on a sheet, because numbers, data, we can create stories with data, but data don't always tell the full story, as we said, because you don't know how those numbers were always produced. So
Absolutely right. No. They're just numbers. They don't. No, excellent.
okay.
Well, I think on balance, in conclusion, from my point of view, I think you're probably closer to the truth than I am. I think I'm being perhaps a little pessimistic, but maybe more related to places where the culture is a little toxic or not quite as good. Leaders not of such high quality they should be. So I concede to you on that point, definitely.
Yeah, but I agree. I mean, I guess maybe as a leadership development coach and speaker, I want to be more hopeful, but I also think of the many examples I have seen in marriages and sports and so forth to know that people do exist in teams, right? Do exist and they perform at high levels over time, but they are indeed rare because humans by nature are just broken, right? Humans are self-interested and humans tend to, at some point, tire of the politics and want to find the easier way to meet their goals, and that's the challenge. Some great people have fallen prey to a little serpent coming and being like, if you just do this, you can get money. They will never know, and they're there on the news for embezzlement, and you're thinking you're smarter than this. But I do think that for many reasons, humans by nature, they want to work that hard, but they don't. When they feel downtrodden or face hurdles, they sometimes, they just lose their way. So that can contribute to it. So I guess that's the end of our discussion. I think
absolutely.
I think that we do believe that high-performing teams can sustain more than likely in the shorter term. Dennis believes 2 to 3 years. I believe 5 years, given the right conditions, given consistent leadership, and given the right type of leadership and the smarter approach to building a strong and healthy team. So
perfect.
Dennis, I think that's a wrap. And
yes, it is indeed. Great topic. Yeah,
I do think so. And the next time we will be talking about leaders of influence. So how can you think of having influence as a leader? And is this something that comes naturally to you? And if it doesn't, can you develop the skill of influence? So we will be talking about that in Leading Conversations episode 4. Okay, so thanks for joining us and see you next time. Bye.
Take care. Bye.